biggest challenge that our education systems have not been reformed to really teach Africans who they are, right? That part of the history has been distorted, and the Afrocentric thought is just a footnote in the African mainstream literature. So what we're having today is personification of European norms that end up creating the identity crisis on the continent, that you have Africans who are physically black. Okay, when you look at them, you say these are black people, but in terms of their values, their tastes and preferences, their worldview, what they like, they feel more close, they feel they're more Europeans, without the good things. So that has been the challenge, because the ripple effect is that you have to be connected with your nature, with where you come from. That's very important. So that's really what the African people today, you find that is just a perfect, an epitome of identity crisis. I mean, Africa. So you have what Mike is talking about, watching foreign movies, and they tend to identify and admire that a lot, feel like, these foreign cultures that are quite good is what I think I want to be like that. And I was telling her the other day that Africans, most of them are not even proud of their African names. Yeah, we like the colonial tags.
Even me, I'm not.
Right? It's because Africans, most of them have been brainwashed and indoctrinated not to celebrate that which is African.
Exactly.
Right? But to look at that which is maybe white as a superior, and that is what they aspire to attain. So it has been quite maybe, I think, legacy of colonial legacy, how it has impacted the Africans today. And for you, I think being in Africa, you may have a different world coming from the US. And the last time, I think, when I interacted with the Malachi for the first time, he told me about his book, and then he told me, of course, you just came from the US, and you accompanied me with your wife that time?
Yeah.
Is it last year, November, around then?
Yeah, around then.
So, what I found quite interesting is his understanding of the black people from a historical point of view, where they're coming from. I found he had a very rich knowledge in terms of understanding the pre-colonial Africa, the way of life. So I spend more time trying to listen, because I realized that most Africans here on the continent, they don't have that understanding. Everything is understood or interpreted through the white man's lens, even from the religion and all that. And this is just very recent, the 19th century, when the colonial powers, of course, came here and established the administration. So a lot of things changed. But then again, does that mean that nothing can be celebrated about the African lives? That Africa did not have anything? Because the impact of colonialism is still very much fresh in African minds today. The African mind is heavily colonized today. How they think, how they see life and everything. And I think that was conquering people on the mind. So the system keep on reproducing colonized people, and that is the biggest tragedy that today that we're talking about in Africa. But if you look at China, China was colonized just like at some other countries in the global south. But China, when you look at the Chinese name, most of them, they have their Chinese name. China has managed to attain civilization within their own culture and heritage, right? And it's a superpower. So when people talk about you are coming to civilize Africa, civilization should be understood as, in my own perspective, it has to do with the learning and borrowing from other people's culture.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean looking down upon other people's culture, undermining that, demonizing, bastardizing their culture, and ended up creating a totally different identity. That is the biggest tragedy that happened on the African continent. And this can be understood from a socio-economic and political aspect. When you look at the social aspect of it, the education system, the religious aspect of it, by African being conquered by other foreign powers, it ended up producing something that is totally very different. When you look at the economic models that you have in Africa, which are not really even working today, because Africa today, we're talking about colonialism, capitalism that has ended up creating a lot of huge deprived populations in terms of dignity and livelihoods. Majority of Africans today are struggling to make a living.
Thank you.
Because of too much corruption and all that. When you look again the political system again, the colonial boundaries from the Berlin Conference in 1884 to 1885, ended up having a different democracy that seems not to be working internally here. That we didn't come up with our own model. So the argument is the post-colonial African states are still struggling with the problem of governance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because how Africans arrive at decisions and how to govern themselves is something that ought to be taught. But I think you may need to look at a book written by a Nigerian professor, Professor Alade Fawole. He has written the book called The Illusion of the Post-Colonial State. The Illusion of Post-Colonial State, Governance and Security Challenges in Africa. This book, which is The Illusion of the Post-Colonial State, Governance and Security Challenges in Africa, he historicizes the post-colonial African, the nation building, the state building in Africa, some of the challenges, and what he argues is that the imperial subversion of the post-colonial state is responsible, right? Such that in the decolonization period in the 1960s, of course, when most African countries were declaring independence, and that was at the height of the Cold War. So many African countries were being pushed to either choose to belong to the capitalist bloc, of course, that comprised the US and the Western allies, or the communist bloc, right? But then again, we also had the Bandung Conference in 1955, which, of course, the African and other countries from Europe and South America decided to chart a different ideological path that non-aligned policies, right? But you can also understand what happened on the continent that time. The likes of Kwame Nkrumah, some of the firebrand African leaders, the Patrice Lumumba, DRC, they really wanted to chart a different ideological inclination. But now, today, I think the external forces seems to have prevailed in a big way. The continent seems to be really in an identity crisis at a crossroad in a way that you cannot tell.
But go back. What you just talked about, that's why that happened. When they killed Patrice Lumumba and those guys, that's why that was able to happen. They had to kill those guys. So anytime somebody like that rises up, they're going to kill them. So this stuff that we talking about right now, man, once you start getting a lot of steam and people start getting behind you, it's going to get dangerous. This stuff we just ain't talking. It's going to get dangerous because people want the world to stay like this because they want to maintain power. So what we doing right now, this is revolutionary, whether you know it or not. This is just a conversation, but this is going to turn into action. So you got to be prepared for stuff like this.
About, like what's going on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Nigeria, because we talked about the history.
Oh shit, you know better than me. Yeah, with Abraham Traore, you know what's going on. You know what's going on. Like that's the time period we in right now. Like we talking, but we at the point where these people done did this to us, but it's time for them to go. They got so much power here. They know this is their life source. They don't want to leave. They're not going to leave. So guess what's going to have to happen? They're inevitable. So, we going to have to train these men up to be mentally prepared and be ready for the time that's at hand. And they ain't ready.
I also value independent thought as Africans. You know what I mean? Like, you can't get African revolution until you value the thoughts of the Africans.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Like these religious and things of that nature, they made us dismiss the way we think, the way our conscience make us think, and then replace it with this worship. Or now we gotta move according to what everybody else tells us. Now we gotta move according to where they say go. But your own mind tells you things to do and where to go. That's why you got imagination. That's why you got different ideals and things of that nature. Because you were given a consciousness for a reason. You know what I mean? So you can submit to your consciousness so you can really change your life in a major way. You see what I'm saying? So when we don't value each other's ideals, imagination, and things of that nature, nah, that's wrong. You thinking dumb. You thinking this and that. We kind of put each other in a box and we subdue the natural expression of the African, of who we are. You know what I mean? When you subdue the thoughts of the African, when you subdue the spirit and energy of the African, you condense them to a box. And that's what has happened to a lot of different Africans. The colonialism, but also the subduing of the African mind and African spirit to where like you try to express yourself, try to talk and things of that nature. Now you got these outside forces, even people closest to you like, nah, don't do that, don't go there. Because it's the fear, you know what I mean? A lot of our people, they not ready to embrace and talk about what's really in the mirror. You know, you are a powerful being, but if you don't look at yourself as powerful, if you just look at yourself as this small speck that can't make change, then that's how you gonna move, that's how you gonna think, and that's how you gonna affect people around you. You're gonna make them feel and think small as well. You know what I mean? So the more we able to see ourselves in the right light, the more we can pass that light on to each other, and we can build and grow together.
Well, let me ask y'all a question real quick. You ever heard of Illuminati?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what Illuminati is, right?
Yes.
Mind control.
Yeah, but it's mind control.
That's the whole premise. So you see these guys with the fame and the fortune and whatnot, but they put that image in front of you so they can put the mind state in front of you.
But
so
it's true. See, it's the real thing happening.
right. Yeah. So
The reason why I really wanted at least Maggie to have a different perspective is because when I interacted with Malachi last time and shared with me his understanding of the African, the pre-colonial Africa, how it was organized from a socio-economic and political aspect, having lived in the US, not even lived, being born there, because it was your first time in Africa.
Yeah.
It's my first time.
yeah.
It's the first time in Africa.
Yeah, it's my first time. Yeah, I came out here last August.
I'm lucky.
You see?
Yeah.
When you listen to Malachi and his brother, the perspective they're sharing, they live in the US, of course. US is a multiracial country, right?
Yeah.
Multiracial. So that means you've lived with the white people, you've lived with the
Mexicans, Asians, Arabians,
Chinese,
you are a
everybody.
descendant. You are a descendant of the slaves who are taken from Africa and shipped to Europe, to the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it means you have a different perspective on how you understand the question of religion. It cannot just be like any other African who lives on the continent,
Right.
who has been born and socialized in that system, so is most likely not to understand a different reality.
Yeah.
So anything else you tell them is like, oh, what do you mean by that? It sounds so strange. I've always believed the world is like this, right? So the only way you can learn is when you interact with other people, they give you their perspective. It's start now provoking your thoughts, stimulating your mind to think. These are people, of course, lived in the US. They live the white people. They understand how they got there because they must really try to trace them. They have experienced all these things. So how they respond to things may be more different from other people who don't have that experience.
Exactly.
So that is the most important thing, because I feel that most Africans on the continent have very limited understanding in terms of understanding their history, proper history, and the colonial legacy seems to have really taken control, even the faculties of thinking, how everything is interpreted, and that becomes one of the biggest impediments and the challenges that we're dealing with the emancipating African people to rise and to take their position in the global stage. Because if you look at other civilizations, when you look at the Chinese civilization, you look at the Europe, you look at the US and other parts of the world, some of them have managed just to organize themselves, but it must start from the question of identity. As Africans, who are we, right? And then from that point, then you start moving forward by organizing yourself. But as long as you're a quasi-identity of another civilization and all that, it means you're totally disconnected from your past, from your heritage, and that I think makes it very difficult for any people to rise, to become great, to actualize who they are. Because I think there's diversity in the universe. All can be all the same cultures, and in that diversity, so we have to celebrate who we are in the context of our culture. But then again, now the problem with the colonialism was dismantling the very African cultures and creating a totally alien or foreign identity that now today the Africans are just something else.
Like I standing here, man, I said we talking here, we speaking this English with English names. This is a totally new creation.
Yeah.
They created this. Like a lot of the Bantus went through slavery. You know, I'm part Bantu and Igbo. So a lot of the Bantus went through slavery. So when I see you, and I was like, man, she look like an African American, bro. But you wouldn't know until you start talking.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times people don't know until you start talking. So our true history, like, because pride is doing a lot of things to people over here, right? So when I'm talking to them and stuff, they thinking that I'm trying to put their culture down or I'm not trying to put you down. I'm trying to show you what's going on, man. Your people here are struggling, right? So we identify to the upper echelon of our people because we tired of being looked at as, you know, whatever they look at themselves. So we want to be looked at the highest standard. So you talk to the people over here who got the good jobs, who done made it. They say, oh no, we got this, we own our own country, this and that. Man, what about your fellow brother here, man? That's out here, the average Kenyan that's out here struggling every day. Like, what about him? Like, he's just totally ignored. Like, and that's the point. Me and my cousin was talking about this morning. He said, you got to understand, man, they don't know. They just got tunnel vision. So it's just about what they got going on and what they doing. Like this man right here, he got to get it just like I did. But we collectively together. And together we is down. You might be up, but we down. So, you know, it's just about addressing everything that's going on and getting people to realize, like, this is what happened. This is what we got to do to change. And it's not about putting you down or your culture. Because I wouldn't be here if I felt like it was a place like that. So, you know. People need to stop listening what they feeling. People listen what they feeling. As soon as they hear something, like, hey, listen, I'm not talking to your feelings, or use your mind. Like, I heard a lot of stuff I ain't like at first, but I was real enough to accept it. Like, you know what, that is right. And it made me a better person. And that's why I'm standing here today.
So, the African continent was not tabula rasa before colonialism. It was not an empty space. There were people who existed. They had their way of life organized from a socio-economic and political. So Africans were there before. In as much as part of this history has not been highly documented, but there are African writers. For example, there's a Senegalese writer called Cheikh Anta Diop. He has written African history pre, during, and post-colonial Africa, how it was organized. So it is very important to understand that no people can be innocent of history. No people can be innocent of history. You had your history, we had our history way back. So that is what I think, even in the curriculum, need to really address to make sure that the Africans really understand who they are. Without that, it becomes very difficult moving forward because, I mean, as a civilization, because you are always thinking to be, you're not who you think you are. Because you're already something else. You're just a foreigner. The question whether Africans sometimes can be viewed as a foreigners in their own land. They don't control their resources. The God they worship, of course, I have no problem with people believing. Maybe it had to be introduced to them. Everything in Africa, styles, what you eat, seems to be foreign. Right? That's part of the colonial legacy that we're talking about. So it's a question of that understanding, and I think this was the perspective that I was trying just to share with Maggie, saying that Maggie, I met with a young man from the US, and he was accompanied with a wife, and they told me something. I was very shocked that you don't find many Africans talking about Africa the way Malachi explained. You know, that colonial, going back to Kenya, the ancient Egyptian civilization and all that. That part of the African history is highly distorted, but of course, very few people have access to that knowledge because even for Africans to afford education, to go to the university and study all these things again, it can be very expensive. So it means they totally live in a totally distorted reality from what is and from who they are. So that has been the challenge. So I really felt that a perspective of an African now this black American in this case, who has been raised, for example, especially in the US, has lived there, and of course, who appreciates or understands how they got there, then would have a really understanding, for example, when you pose a question, are you born again to them? Then you may start to explain to them what that means, and then they may also give you a perspective on what they think about that particular question.
True, and we Africans that was taken to the U.S., see, he's still using black Americans because he still got the colonial. No, I'm just playing. But it's just the terms that have been given to us, you know. Yeah, we black because they call us black. We Americans because they call us American. But actually, we're Africans that were taken to America. That's the true reality of it. So, you know, we got to get labels or limits. We got to get rid of these labels that they done placed on us.
Yeah, because I'm, like he said, labels are limits. Because I'm working on a book called Labels Are Limits, Embracing the Essence of Life. So the thing about it is, like, the labels that's been put upon us, like being black, even Africa, you know what I mean? All these labels that was put upon us, it limit how we express ourselves. It limit our connection and things of that nature. So I wrote a book called Labels Are Limits, Embracing the Essence of Life. So when you embrace the essence of life, and basically embracing the essence of life means embracing the thoughts you have, embracing the bad aspects about